Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of professional wrestling comes one of the most popular stars of all time with an edgy anti-hero persona, a rebellious attitude, and a wild streak that makes him an unpredictable fighter between the ropes and a riveting character on the mic. We're talking about Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley was born Jonathan Good on December 7, 1985 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Good was an avid wrestling fan growing up and began training for the business while still in high school. Good eventually dropped out of school to pursue his dream of becoming a pro wrestler. Good trained in 2004 under the legendary Les Thatcher and Cody Hawk in the Heartland Wrestling Association. Good became Jon Moxley and quickly rose to the top of the promotion, where he was regularly featured over the next 6 years. Moxley worked the independent wrestling scene during this time and became a top star in Combat Zone Wrestling, where he became infamous for hardcore bloody battles against the company's heavy hitters. Moxley's big break came in 2011 when he signed a developmental deal with WWE. Mox was sent to Florida Championship Wrestling and became Dean Ambrose. Ambrose only spent 1 year in developmental before arriving on WWE's main roster in November of 2012. Ambrose debuted alongside Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns in a trio that would come to be known as The Shield. The Shield attacked random WWE superstars indiscriminately over the next several months, establishing themselves as the most dangerous faction in the company. Ambrose regularly stood out in front as the group's mouthpiece, though that role was soon shared with Seth Rollins. Each member of the Shield had his own identity, with Ambrose as the rebellious wildcard, Rollins as the fearless daredevil, and Reigns as the deadly powerhouse. Though the Shield often attacked babyface superstars, the group began to grow in popularity among the fans. The Shield reigned in WWE over the next 2 years, with each man winning championship gold along the way. The trio turned babyface during their run, and as time went on, they were the most popular superstars in the company. The Shield's eventual split took place on June 2nd of 2014, when Rollins turned on Ambrose and Reigns. Seth joined Triple H's Authority faction and eventually became the WWE Champion. The title would eventually be won by all three former Shield members over the next few years as they dominated WWE's main event scene. Though he was a bankable star during his time in WWE and enjoyed a run that put him in championship contention for the bulk of his stay, Ambrose was often booked in silly situations. His renegade character morphed into more of a clown than a killer, and eventually this booking began to take its toll. An ill-advised heel turn in 2018 made matters worse for Dean, marking the beginning of the end for his WWE career. Ambrose left WWE in 2019 and once again became Jon Moxley. Moxley signed with AEW, where he became the company's second world champion and held the title for 277 days. Mox became a top guy in AEW and is now one of the hottest acts in the pro wrestling industry. And that's the lowdown on Jon Moxley. In the time I've spent in pro wrestling locker rooms over the years, I remember once I shared one with Gene Ligon. And for anyone who's not old school like I am, and maybe some other fans out there listening today are, Gene Ligon was the original Thunderfoot in Jim Crockett Promotions. He was, of course, a much older guy by the time I'd met him, and he came in. I think he actually worked one match, and of course the guy that he worked bumped for him and everything because, he's an older guy. But one thing that stands out to me is that I remember in the locker room, he was kind of holding court, as a lot of the older veterans do. And a lot of us were in awe of the guy because, he had been there. And it wasn't, this guy worked for Vince. It wasn't like that. It was, he worked for Jim Crockett. He worked with all the greats, and we had respect for him as a talent as well. And I remember him telling stories about Dusty. If anybody knows me, they can tell you that Dusty Rhodes is my all-time. He's great. He's the best. And on the stick, he was great in the ring and just all around. Dusty was he was a father figure to me when I was growing up. That's another story for another time. But Ligon was telling stories about Dusty and his booking. And now it's famous or infamous, and it's notorious that Dusty was a big John Wayne fan, and that he often wrote storylines for Crockett featuring himself in the John Wayne role, where it was like, just when you think John Wayne's dead, just when you've got him outgunned, he manages to come back. He fights the odds. His best friend betrayed him. His other friend got killed. I mean, and somehow he manages to fight back against the bad guys and come out on top. Dusty's a big John Wayne fan. They actually shared the same birthday or same death date, I believe. It's kind of an odd coincidence, man. Really weird stuff there, if I'm being honest. But my takeaway from all of that was, yeah, I get it. It's cool to have that John Wayne archetype. The crowd rallies behind him. He's the guy. It's the one that you cheer for. You cheer him on to victory against all odds. So fast forward many years later to the creation of AEW, and I just assumed that Cody Rhodes was going to be the John Wayne of the group. It just made sense. It's Dusty's kid. He's crazy talented. He's very good with his character. We get to see a lot more of him now, Phil, than we ever got to see in WWE, which is good because the guy is very good at what he does. But I thought he was going to be the John Wayne. Little did I know it's a John, but it's Jon Moxley. What do you think about the idea that Jon Moxley is essentially the John Wayne of AEW?
It's you're talking about one of the biggest surprises of 2019, and watching him not only finesse WWE and finish up his contract and basically make it seem like, nope, I don't want to do wrestling anymore. I'm gonna go do some outside stuff. I'm not as interested in wrestling. I might come back, and then he drops this um, awesome vignette like the second his his contract is up. And you're right, it has all of the John Wayne tropes of him being in jail, breaking out, and being like the cool man with no name esh character. And
Yeah.
I think it definitely fits.
I'm with you, man. Back during the time when he left WWE, I heard the same things we all heard the same things. And I don't know if he was active in the press at the time. I think he had commented somewhere and basically said, look, I don't know if I'm done, but I need a break and I can't get a break the way things are going. I'm just paraphrasing, kids. But yeah, I'm like you. We kind of all assume, well, no, he's probably done at least for a while. But yeah, the word finesse. Don't know if finesse is ever used for Mox that much, but man, it applies. He's a smart businessman. He has to be. All these guys and gals in the business, they call it the business for a reason, right? They're business people. That's what this is supposed to be. You got to look out for your own best interest. But I'll tell you this, and you and I have spoke off mic about this several times over the past several months, just in random conversation about how I don't know if either one of us expected quite how big he was going to get and be for this company. Because man, he's and Cody's an integral part. Not trying to throw shade at Cody here. I love Cody. If Cody left today, I don't know that they would miss a beat on TV, at least their product in front of the fans, because Mox is there. Did you kind of assume going into the AEW thing that Cody was the alpha male on TV? Because I kind of believe that from the start.
Well, as a New Japan guy, I always assumed that Kenny was going to be eventually become like the big world champion, and he was eventually going to be like the face of the company. And I could tell that they were grooming Hangman Page for that. Um, but yeah, just in terms of watching Mox become like the breakout star, and I don't even know if breakout star is the right word because he's not really breakout star. He's been around for a while. But just watching him have this career resurgence with them has been amazing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Mox has been working since 2004,
Yeah.
and I don't. In some ways, it feels like that's about right. In other ways, it feels like this guy's been working for 25 years. Like he just he's got the subtle nuances that only a veteran can have, and unless you study the business, you don't really know what I'm talking about. Phil, it's just very subtle. The way you move, the way you address the camera, the way you pace the ring, what you're doing in between the moves. And that's a big stickler for me. If someone's just kind of there, they're not in the moment, you don't see facials, they're not living it, breathing it, eating it, it's going to be obvious. Mox can do all of that. The greats do that, and that's what sets him apart from a lot of other people in AEW, if I'm being honest, especially the
Yeah.
younger guys, because they've not done it long enough. But man, I mean, we've just begun to gush and not even really got started, but there's something's got to be said for the fact before we get into the blood and guts of this, because we'll get there. I think something's got to be said for his. I was getting ready to use the word technique, which might be laughed at with Moxley, but dude, he can flat out work. I mean, I think something needs to be said about that, you know?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most impressive things that he's done since he's left WWE is he's kind of reworked his in-ring style, and I think he was on the way to doing that with WWE, and they kind of gave him some pushback.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that; I could be wrong, but I know that when there was talk of him turning heel, and he got a little bit bigger, and he came back in phenomenal shape at first. They had said he had started retraining and, doing a little bit more MMA stuff and doing a little bit more with strikes and holds. And you can see that in his wrestling now with AEW. Like he still works really well, but like when his mat game has drastically improved in my opinion. I think adding certain, MMA aspects to his offense has absolutely made him stand out.
Yeah, and it's him wanting to improve his game. And you see those, I was going to call them exit interviews, which essentially is kind of what they were. They did that documentary on him, remember, on WWE Network before he was
Yeah.
even gone. It was his comeback. And man, looking back on it, he was kind of telling you then that, oh man, I'm going to go back. I don't want to. Like he all but said that on the freaking documentary. I'm like, the people filming this, and when they watched it later, like, could they not see that he's not happy? I'm thinking, man, how much of this is in character and how much of this is actually the guy talking? But yeah, man, he wanted to change. He wanted to do something else. And, he talked about on Jericho's podcast after he'd officially left and joined AEW that, he wanted to come back with a new look, new music, a new style, all this stuff, because he was just tired of the same old thing. Dude, I think that speaks to his professionalism, if nothing else, because he doesn't want to just play the greatest hits. He wants to go out and cut a new album. He wants to experiment with new sound. That's what I liken that to. And good on him for that. Um, Let me rewind for a second. Let's talk about the Shield, because we kind of I don't know where the story of the former Dean Ambrose begins for you. I I had heard Moxley's name when he was in like CZW and whatnot when he was coming up. I didn't follow him, and I didn't know enough to know who he was. I'd seen his picture. I'd read some comments. I saw a couple of promos, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a guy, and I can't say I was really feeling it if I'm being straight with you. But of course, he's on your radar as a member of the Shield. Were you familiar with John before he joined WWE?
No. I after he joined WWE, I saw like some stuff that he did as John Moxley. Like I saw some brief matches and some clips and stuff, but I only knew him as Dean Ambrose. And I don't think people remember the other crazy thing about his resurgence when you talk about the Shield is just when the Shield first came about, Ambrose looked like the star. He looked like the leader of the Shield. And I mean that's before, you know, um, Rollins, set himself apart as the work rate guy, quote unquote, and the big spots guy because he was doing like the Phoenix splashes and he was doing all of the cool stuff. But in terms of like the talker out of the group, it was always Ambrose. And Ambrose always kind of had like this allure to him.
He was always front and center in the promos. He was usually in the center of the three, usually.
Yes.
And they were running that gimmick where supposedly he was holding it was a handheld cam, which obviously the cameraman was standing there and he just had his hand out on the camera. I mean, it's okay. It worked. It got the point across, right? But be careful with that, $60,000 camera there, John. Don't drop it on the floor, right? Because TV production not cheap. But yeah, I'm like you, man. From the jump, and I think we said this in the AEW episode that we kind of assumed from the beginning. Well, he's the leader. He's the de facto leader. Roman wasn't saying much. We knew Seth as Tyler Black from Ring of Honor. We didn't really know Joe Anoa'i, aka Roman Reigns. Didn't really know him at all, except from FCW, right? Going into
Right.
NXT. But yeah, Mox just looked comfortable. I mean, Seth did too. Roman didn't. And there's a reason for that. I mean, why not? I mean, how could he look that comfortable, just going into the big money gimmick in on WWE's main roster? I
Yeah.
wonder at what point, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe you do. I wonder at what point was it, what was the whole idea, it's the three of them? Or did it start off like, yeah, Moxley's going to be the guy? But from what CM Punk has said, from a lot of other people have said, no, they knew from day one they wanted Roman to come out of that group. I just wonder, dude, I would love to know the conversations behind the scenes when all that was coming together. Like, how do you think that went? Do you think they were looking at the other two guys, or was this just a vehicle for Roman to get over?
I don't think it was just a vehicle to get Roman over, but you could tell that there were hints that they wanted Roman to be the guy because he he fit all of the wrestling tropes of if there's a stable, there's always like a cool heater, right? There's always the big, tall, striking heater of the group that ends up being the big star because he ends up being booked the strongest out of the three, and he ends up being, the most, physically dominant. It's kind of like Batista, right? Like Batista
Mm.
ends up being like the single star out of Evolution along with Randy Orton, but he ends up being like his own guy in that way. It's kind of like you can see that that's kind of happening with Wardlow a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like Diesel is another. Like, I mean, he started out as HBK's heater. The same thing. He kind of made his own lane, and so you can kind of see that happening with Roman and with the three of them. But there's such an interesting dynamic because you've got Rollins, who is like an indie darling. Like he came in, he already had like this impressive resume for himself as an indie wrestler. He already had some clout for himself. He already, before he came to the main roster, he had won at the NXT championship. He was the first
Hmm.
NXT champion.
Right.
So he already had like all of these things that technically would make him the big star of the group, but he still was positioned behind Ambrose, and Ambrose still had like this presence to him. He still had this thing where he could hold his own. And I mean, man, you could complain a lot about stuff that WWE did, but the Shield is one of the few things that they got right in terms of making all three of those guys matter.
And they created three stars at the same time.
Yes.
I think, dude, I don't know if we talk about that enough. That they created, I mean, not solely, obviously, but they had a major hand in creating three future world champions at the same time. Like, I don't know if I'm going back through my head here through memories, but I don't know if you can even say that about the Horsemen. The Horsemen, as great as the first two incarnations of that group was, and they were amazing, especially the second one. We didn't create four world champions out of that. Created one, which is fine. But man, talk about shooting for the moon, dude. I mean, three world champions in one faction. That's I think it may be unheard of to that point. Evolution, I guess. Well,
Yeah,
there you go.
maybe.
Evolution. Evolution, I guess, would be the second group to do something like that, or the first group to do something like that, and then the Shield followed after that. So that makes the most sense. I think of the three, if you had to roll the dice and say which one's not going to get a world title, you probably would have said Ambrose, because when they split that group up, wow. I mean, we really knew, it was obvious who they wanted. And it's like Dean Ambrose kind of started, I don't want to say fell by the wayside, but Yeah, to me, it was kind of become pretty obvious to me that okay, this is starting to feel like the odd man out. Did you get that sense when they split the Shield up?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was clear that they wanted Roman to be the guy. But the interesting thing about that is, I feel like coming out of the breakup of the Shield, Ambrose came off the best as a face once he turned. He had the more memorable feud with Rollins, in my opinion. They had the great, Money in the Bank feud. They had the great ladder match stuff. Um, I feel like all of their stuff is more interesting together than anything that Roman and Rollins had as just a one on one feud.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I do think he had the best, and of course, a lot of that goes back to the fact that he was Roman had not had that experience. He wasn't, the world traveled star, and he wasn't, a veteran of a lot of wars coming before this. I mean, Seth Rollins, a former Ring of Honor world champion, and you could turn your nose up at that if you want to, I guess, but he'd already been there. He knew what it was like to carry a main title and sort of right on top of a company. He knew that feeling. He knew the responsibility that came along with it. So, yeah, I mean, of the three, Roman was the weakest and was going to be the weakest for a long time. But yeah, I'm with you, man. It's Ambrose. I thought had the better feuds. So this is gonna invite some laughs, I'm sure. The lunatic fringe thing. See, I knew you'd snicker. I'm gonna snicker too. At the beginning, it was fine. Lunatic Fringe was an old song by Tom Cochrane, and I think it was the '70s, mid to late '70s, early '80s maybe. And so when I heard the nickname, I thought, hmm, I don't mind that. I think I like that. And then it's like, well, if one of them has to be crazy, that's probably going to be Dan Ambrose. I mean, it makes sense. And
Yeah,
then they started working the gimmick, and it's like, okay, I see. This is haha. This is not
mhm.
Lunatic Fringe, as in the Joker escaping from Arkham. This is a cheap rip-off carbon copy of the Joker escaping from Arkham. I mean, dude, I don't know if we've got enough hours in the day to talk about the nonsense they had him doing. Mustard and ketchup spring to mind. A potted plant
Yeah,
springs to mind. Um, dude, where did it go? I mean, the obvious answer is WWE, Tom. Don't you know anything? Where did it go wrong with this idea of the lunatic fringe? Was it they just didn't know how to approach it, or wrong guy calling the shots? Putting pen to paper. What happened here?
it's their usual issues of booking a face competently and making a face look cool and interesting. They always do this thing with their faces where they always have to make them goofy and smile a lot, and so him initially having this edge to him and being crazy and having a lunatic fringe thing, that turned into kookiness, and it turned into, well, he's just this wacky guy. You just never know what he's gonna do, and it's like, no, no, it making him unpredictable and having him do spontaneous things is fine, but then once you go out of that and you start trying to add WWE's humor to it, it just doesn't work.
It's just cartoonish. It's what they've been accused of since the '80s. Like they create cartoon characters out of the talents, and it's all done in an effort to get it over with a younger audience. Like, well, we got to cartoon this Dean Ambrose guy up because he's maybe too edgy. We can't go down that road. This is modern era, by God, and we can't do that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if we knew the potential this guy had because we couldn't really see it too much.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of how Mankind went from like this like really like edgy character to
Ah,
this like very lighthearted, kooky character. And that works for Mick because Mick is a lovable guy. And you want to root for Mick. And Mick is one of the best underdog characters in wrestling. Um and so it works for him. But I think they want to take that kind of same image and put that on any character that has this kind of crazy gimmick and go, okay, well, that's the that's the standard for the crazy baby face character. And it's like, yeah, but it just doesn't work for everybody. That worked for Mick because Mick bought in and Mick made it work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a generic hand me down you can just give to anybody. It's not one size fits all. And look, if anybody's listening and disagrees, Ed, you're welcome to disagree. But here, I would invite you to go back and watch some of those old Ambrose promos when the Lunatic Fringe thing was really kicking in, and tell me what you see in his eyes. Because I guarantee you see a guy who's frustrated and doesn't want to say what he's getting ready to say and hates life. I'm sorry, but I see it. I mean, you can say whatever they tell you to, and you can act it out however they tell you to, and that's fine. But your face doesn't lie. And you can see, man, going back to those promos, you're like, oh God, dude, he is not having a good day right now.
Oh man, when you can obviously see it is the infamous Stone Cold interview, and he's just sitting there, he's sitting there trying to eat it, and
Oh,
he's just trying to give him the best answer he can without telling him like, Steve, you don't understand what I'm working with here. Like it's not like when you were there. Like you can see it all over his face. He wants to say it, and he's just like, "Yep, I hear you, man. I like that." He was just trying to be as polite and go with the flow as much as possible. But you could just see all of the awkwardness in this interview of him just trying to toe the line.
and you know what? I'm gonna be straight with you. I if I'm of a certain opinion one way or the other, I don't run from it. It's documented anyway. Why run from it? I'm not a politician. Um, when that interview happened, I didn't go easy on Dean. I did not, because I either wrote or said or both or podcasted even, maybe all three. I don't know, but I essentially said, this guy ought to be ashamed of himself. I mean, you're talking to a legend. Step your game up. What's the problem? Whatever the problem is, get over it. This is your time to talk to a legend. Step up to the plate. Now, I'm not going to take back what I said because I stick to it. However, knowing now what we know about where his head was, yeah, I could see he was unhappy. But like, Phil, you know this. When they put a mic in your hand, whoever the they are, that's your chance to connect, and that's your chance to get yourself out there. It was one podcast episode for one day only, across from the guy that put that company back on the map and was their top earner of all time, probably still is top draw of all time. I mean, that's all you could do. I mean, I don't want to sing the guy's praises and then bash him, but at the time, that's what I was thinking. This is all you got. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know. I wasn't in his head, so I can't sit here and logically say, "Hey, look, I don't care if you're unhappy. Suck it up and do the interview." Who am I to say that, man? You know what I mean? So maybe
yeah.
that's just not being me not being fair to him too much.
I just think at the time, and I didn't think that much into it at the time, but you've got a guy um, that might want to, be as open as possible with Steve. And he might want to say and agree with a lot of things that Steve says, but at the same time, you're sitting here doing an interview with Steve on a company that you work for's platform. It's not like you are somewhere else and this is like a, off the cuff,
Mm.
interview. This is something for the WWE network. So this thing is very it's very calculated in some ways. As much as Steve is, Steve, and I'm sure people think, oh, I can get in there and tell Steve, how it is. You can't because that's just not the form that this show is.
Yeah, because they'll edit it out. It won't matter what you say. They'll clip it. They'll clip it and trim it. Steve's not editing the show.
Yeah, and I mean, even Steve, I'm sure he knows that there's certain lines that he cannot cross on the show.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's certain things that even if he does cross a line, there's certain things that they're just not gonna let him get past.
Um. So the first time Austin ever did his podcast, I'm talking about ever. Period. Was a beta test. And the first guy to call in as a guest on that beta was yours truly. And
Wow.
he'd flashed up on Twitter really quick and said, I'm conducting a beta test. Here's a phone number. I think it was a phone number. So I said, I just happened to catch it at the exact moment he tweeted. I'm like, cool, I'll do it. So I but I called and I was the first guy. And I'm like, sweet. And he's like, hey, son, you're the first guest on the show and all this stuff. And I think I asked a question about something about Brock Lesnar and if you could come back, would you do it? Just generic nonsense pro wrestling fan questions, which I could have come up with something better, but judging that now versus what he was when he started, like a lot of us in the podcasting game, Phil, and I'm sure you can see this about yourself. I mean, you get
Yeah.
better with time. Repetition is the key to getting better in anything. So you're right. I think that him sitting there at that table across from Ambrose at the time would be like, I wonder what was said in between takes. I wonder what was said when they went off the air. I wonder what was said after the camera quit rolling. Was it
Yeah.
like, hey, are you feeling okay? Is everything all right? Because you really seem out of it right now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Steve say he regretted how he handled that interview as well?
I think you're right. Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, I'm sitting here saying that he knows that that there's a line, but at the same time, it's Steve. Like, there's not much they can do to him at this point. Like, he knows at this point they bring him in for what they bring him in. He is considered a legend. He's not going to get punished like Ambrose would get punished for saying something off the cuff. You know, they might tell Steve, "Oh, you can't do that," or whatever else, but they're not gonna punish him for it. It's Steve Austin, and he doesn't work. He doesn't work a regular schedule for them. What are they gonna do? Take him off TV? Like,
Right.
they didn't do anything to him. So
I
there's
he's not even on a Legends contract, is he?
I don't think he is.
Yeah, he's his own man. And the audio version of the Stone Cold podcast is not connected to W that I know of. That's just him. That's just his podcast.
Oh yeah, the newer version of it, right? Because I know the
Yeah.
other version they used to have it directly linked to the WWE network. I don't know if this new podcast is different.
So the audio was first, and then the video that they started putting on WWE Network was second. So I guess the audio morphed into that. Maybe I'm not sure, but yeah, the audio version was just him, dude. We got to talk about comparisons. I started the show off with John Wayne / Dusty Rhodes, which I see a lot of that in John. I really do. But man, from the day that Steve Austin walked out of that company and that gimmick was gone, every person that has come down the pike, that company in some form or fashion has tried to say, well, look here, look at this guy. And then his fans and his writers and his podcasters have always said, hey, it should be the next Stone Cold. Look at him. He's a rebel. He's a renegade. He's a rule breaker. He doesn't play nice. He's got that draw, man. He's got that finesse, that character. He's got that charisma. Oh man, look out. He don't play by the rules, and he's a maverick. And I mean, we do it all the time. I'm going to be honest. And
Yeah.
Ambrose was one of the guys I did it with because I'm like, this is perfect. He doesn't have to try hard to be this guy because he already is this guy. I mean, with the exception of Punk, I think it fits Ambrose better than it fit anybody else that was ever compared to Austin from the jump, man.
Yeah, I think he already had kind of this thing that was similar to Austin when he was with WWE. Because I mean, even just like the audio cue of the way his music started with the motorcycle revving up, and it just had like this, like you knew once that hit, oh, it's Ambrose.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing now. Like the thing that's interesting about him now, and watching him come out, and I think I first noticed it last year, Revolution. And, this could be part of my, hometown bias. It was in Chicago and I was watching it and it's freezing cold here at that time. And so Ambrose comes in from outside of the McCormick Center into the Wintrust Center. And he's standing out there with like, the usual, his vest on, no shirt on. It's freezing cold out there. Walks in from outside. He just looks like unbothered, untouched. He has like this this aura to him that is just this coolness to him that is just like you just cannot fabricate it. And he just has like this swagger, the way he walks, the way he moves, the way he walked into the arena and walked down the steps, and you could just see it. Like this guy is like cool. Like there's just something about him. He just has it.
He's got a swagger. He's got a swagger. He's got a presence. He is, and I've repeated this line so many times through the years. And ironically enough, going back to different versions of this very podcast, I'm going to totally use that and rip it off from now on. By the way, so get used to it. But I got this from the NBA at 50 when they were talking about Jordan, and I don't remember who said it, but it might have been Bob Costas that said if you didn't know who Michael Jordan was and he walked into a room, you would go, "Well, that's got to be somebody. I don't know who he is, but that's got to be somebody." Not just because he's tall and he has a striking facial features and whatnot, but because he has a presence. If Moxley walked into a room full of people who didn't know him, they'd say, "I wonder if that is that guy. Is he a motorcycle? Is he a race car driver? He's got to be somebody. I feel like he's somebody. He's got that aura around him, for lack of a better word. And it's so funny because he's just a normal guy. Like you look at him physically, there's nothing special about Jon at all. I mean, he's not really big like Dusty. He's not really ripped like Lex. There's nothing from a physical standpoint that would suggest superstar.
What the funny thing about it is, I was looking at this for something I wrote a few weeks ago, and most of the main eventers for AEW are pretty short. Like they're like 6 foot or shorter, and
Wow.
I think Moxley is the only guy that's listed above 6 feet at this moment. That's like a major star, and he's like 6'3". And you wouldn't he doesn't look tall. Like he doesn't carry himself like he's tall. But he is, and so when you see him walking, he just looks like, oh, it's Moxley. Like it just it. I think it's just the way he carries himself. He just seems so. He just has the everyman guy thing, but at the same time, he doesn't seem like an everyman. Like he doesn't seem like a guy that you would just see walking down the street. Like he seems like a guy if you walked in a bar, he would just be sitting there having a good time. But at the same time, he just seems like he's so far away at the same time. Like it's interesting. And I mean, when he came out at Double or Nothing is where he made his debut, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So when he came out at Double or Nothing, and this pop was just out of this world. It's one of the loudest pops I've ever heard. And he just comes out and he slides in the ring, and like the way he slides in the ring and he does that move and just kind of like turns and looks at Omega, and it's like this guy's something, man. You can just see it.
Yeah, there's something about him. There always has been. But I don't know if we actually saw it until, and like you said, Double or Nothing, that's true, is when he first got to AEW. But yeah, him coming through the crowd. And, I love that he is maintaining the Shield entrance. And I don't know how much of that is because it's him paying respects to Roman and Seth, or how much of it is him just saying, "Yeah, my guy would come through the crowd. He wouldn't come out of the locker room."
See, I kind of have a hot take with that because I don't even know if it's a hot take, but I think that it's no longer a Shield thing. I think it's an Ambrose thing.
Ah,
Um, I don't feel like it feels like the Shield. Like when the Shield were doing it, they came down and they were very like stern. They were all three together. They were a force. When Ambrose comes out on his own doing it, it looks like a different thing. Um, when they came out of the Shield, it was almost like get out of our way. Nobody wants to touch him. But it's all when he comes down by himself as Ambrose in AEW, he's a star. It's like you want to get close to him. But just like the guy they had to had to tackle, because he was trying to touch him when he
yeah.
came out. It's different. It's just like this different glow to him as a singles guy. And I just don't ever feel like he had this aura to him with WWE. There was a brief moment when he first came back, right after the shoulder injury,
Yeah.
and he was supposed to turn heel with Seth, and I think that was when Seth brought him back as his like enforcer for the match with Dolph. he came out that night, and it was just like, man, this guy, man. And it was almost like maybe he's been gone for that long, and it's just like this is just we missed him.
Yeah.
But he just looked great that night. I mean, it could have been just that he had time off and he looked healthy. He was in great shape. He had like the new haircut. He looked fantastic. And I was just like, this guy is just they've got to do something with him. I was thinking that at the time. I was like, they've got to do something with this guy now that he's back. He's just it just was something about it when he came back.
Dude, I'm in total agreement. I remember that moment as well, and almost thinking as he came down the ramp next to Seth, not that I wasn't, forecasting a heel turn in my head. I wasn't going there. But I was thinking something's different. Something's changed. It's so funny you put it that way, man. Because I'm thinking, yeah, I think maybe we're going to see a different version of this guy moving forward. It just felt not heel, but edgy, hardcore for lack of a better word. And yeah, I could sense that as well. We had flashes of it, like you said. I was in Charlotte the week after he turned on Seth, and all he did was come out on the steps up in the stands, and he was next to our aisle. He's like right there. We had great pictures of him, and I was kind of waiting for him to, open his mouth, and I think he had a mic in his hand. And remember, he didn't speak. And the
Yeah.
crowd's popping for him, and they're wanting him to come down and explain himself, and he just wouldn't do it. He didn't do it. And I was like, come on. And then he just left. But yeah, there was something different about him then too. I mean, listen, man, call it for what it is. The Jon Moxley we have in today's AEW is not the same guy because he has freedom. That's got
Yes.
to have a lot to do. And look, man, anyone that signs with Vince McMahon has to know what they're getting into. I mean, people talking about Eli Drake. Well, LA Knight's dumb. I agree. I hate the name. But guess what Eli Drake knows? He knows what he's getting into. You know who you're getting in bed with. Don't play dumb and act like you don't know. And then fast forward 2 years from now and Eli Drake's got a sob story. I don't want to hear it. No disrespect to Eli Drake. I like him. But don't talk to me 2 years from now about how you can't believe it went as bad as it did. You know how many guys have come out of that company in the past 10 years with the same story, Phil? The same story. Not a variation, not similar, the same story. I mean, that's not a coincidence, man. And Ambrose was handcuffed for a long time over there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to a lot of these guys' credit, um, I think a lot of them, the dream is to be with WWE for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a lot of these guys, they think, well, that won't be me. I'll be the guy that changes that narrative. I'll be the guy that makes it work because this is still my dream, and I believe that I can make it work. So I get that on some levels. I get that some people are just like, I've heard the horror stories, but that won't be me. I'll be the difference. And I don't think everybody understands the corporate machine that you're working against. And again, that's not totally just a WWE knock. That's just the corporate world. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that with AEW as well. Um, but yeah, I think definitely you get more of an idea of how creative this guy is and just how much you just allow this guy to talk like himself and to just do what he wants to do. Like he's a star. He doesn't need to be overproduced. He doesn't need to be scripted for. Just let that guy give that guy ideas of what you want the story to be. Give him the beats and the notes, and that's it.
Mm.
Uh, you don't really need to. You don't need to write promos for him. Why would you write promos for a guy? I mean, ever since he's gotten there and he you got a mic in front of him, man, he's the best talker in the company in my opinion. He is. I mean, you can make a strong case that he's the best talker in the industry. He's that good in my opinion. I mean, he's been cutting some fantastic promos. The only other guy in the company that's close is Kingston.
Yeah. And honestly, you said in the industry, I can't think of anybody better. I can't. I don't.
You have a hard time.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, to me, like Bray's up there for me, but Bray's up there for different reasons. Bray knows how to tell a story. Bray gets his character. He understands how to get that character over. And I mean, that's a whole different story watching some of this stuff now and just seeing how sorely he's missed with some of the spooky stuff they're doing because it's missing Bray. Bray knows how to get that stuff to work. He's the piece. He's the special he's the special ingredient. um but I mean just like in terms of believability and stuff, like there's other games like I think Samoa Joe's still a fantastic talker, but I still think like Mox is still up there, man. If he's not the best, he's absolutely like in the top 3.
I said on a different podcast the other night that, okay, so I'm presented with a non-fan, and I'm told, okay, Tom, here's a non-fan, and it's today. As we record this. Yes, it's 2021. But I'm presented with a non-fan. I'm told you get to show them a promo from today, and that's the person's gateway into becoming a fan. And you got to convince them with this promo. And I was like, hands down, Jon Moxley, hands down. There's no one else. There is no one else.
Yeah.
No one screaming, no one with, dark eye makeup, no one gothic, no one yelling, no one bleeding, no one. I mean, it's Mox all day, every day, because he is so compelling. And my wife used to watch wrestling with me fairly frequently, and she's been to the big shows with me and been to shows that I've been involved with and in. And she doesn't watch it all anymore. But man, when I've got a Moxley promo, I'm like, come here, you got to see this. And she'll dig it. And it's like, it's still something that she can get something out of because he is so photogenic's not the right word. That's not what I'm going for. He chews up the scenery. When you hit record on or go action, whatever you're doing, it's his time. God, my God, it's amazing how good he is. And I mean, I don't know. Was he this good in WWE, or did he just again, Phil, freedom? The freedom to be himself, the freedom to write his own shtick, the freedom to be his own man. That's got to count for a lot of this, man. I mean, did you know? Could you have predicted how good this guy was going to be on the mic anyway when he got to Tony Khan's company?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I saw certain things when he left. I was like, "Oh, this guy is different." Like even when he showed up in New Japan, I was like, "No, this guy's different. Like this isn't Ambrose." But man, no, he continues to shock me just how good he is as a promo guy. I mean, his promos are always on the money. They're always interesting. They're always full of a lot of passion. I'm telling you, I have a hard time coming up with 2 or 3 guys that I think are in that same category. Maybe you could throw Heyman in there,
Mm.
but whew, it's tough.
Yeah, he's hands down the best of the current generation. I just can't think of anybody else. If Okada, dude, you know how I feel about Okada. A lot of people do. Um, and I don't even want to say speak English. I don't care. But if Okada were that captivating presence on the mic, you could very well make the case for him being the most well-rounded, best performer in the history of the business. And I know that's a big thing to say. And I'm an old school guy who grew up loving Flair, and I still love Flair. But for total package from head to toe, but I don't know that people in Japan consider him to be a great promo. I don't know the answer to that. It just feels like when Okada talks, he talks. You know,
Yeah,
like Jay White cutting a promo is not Okada. Jay White has oomph behind it, and Okada kind of doesn't. But Ambrose is the same, or excuse me, Moxley's the same way to me.
yeah. Boy, one thing I will say about Okada, and it's the same with when you say about Moxley when he walks into the arena, like he's all eyes on him. And when Okada comes in, you hear that coin drop, and he comes in and raises hands, and the money comes showering down.
Yeah.
It's nothing like it. There's no one in New Japan that has the same presence as this guy. And I feel like if you would have asked me 3 years ago do I believe that Dean Ambrose could stand in the same ring with that guy and match presence with him? I would have said no. But today, I would absolutely say yes.
I don't think there's a better compliment in today's generation. I just don't think there is. And dude, I 100% agree with you. I for sure. He's just like I said, man. He's got a presence. There's something about him that when you see him, you just want to see more of him. And yes, he's blossomed when he got to AEW. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. I don't think there could have been better timing with him getting out and going to New Japan first. I think that was, first of all, there wasn't really an AEW to go to yet. So he went to New Japan first. And man, this guy got to work a who's who in that country and in that company. Like some of the biggest names in that company today. I mean, Ishii, Minoru Suzuki, for God's sake. And the whole time teaming up with Shooter Umino, called him Shooter. I still to this day, I love that. And he looked like he was having fun. And because he was. And it was so good and so refreshing to see him having fun again. And I mean, we saw him having fun in the early days of the Shield. We saw him having fun and when they got really big. But after that, I don't know how much fun this guy really had. I mean,
yeah, I'm telling you, man. That night he came out with a Double or Nothing. It was just, man. There are a few moments in wrestling where you can just tell, like beyond in the moment, that it's just a great moment, but you can just tell how the wrestler is in the moment, and you can just see it. Like the closest I can think of is watching Daniel Bryan come back and give that speech when he was cleared to wrestle again, and he finished the speech, and he was standing there right below the WrestleMania sign, and it was just like chills. And it's the same way with with Mox when he came back at Double or Nothing, and he beats the crap out of Omega, and he's standing on top of the chips, and he's raising his hands, and the crowd is just cheering like crazy. Like you could just see in that moment just how happy he was. Like he in character, like he still stayed in character, but you could see like he was just having a blast.
I mean, it's important. It's important to for a guy as talented as he is to enjoy what he's doing. And a lot of that, of course, comes from, again, I go back to the word freedom because I think it's a big deal here, but trusting him. And you've got an owner in that company that trusts the talent. And instead of saying, here's what you're going to do, maybe Colin is saying something to the effect of, hey, what would you like to do? What do you want to say? Tell me how you want to get there. Here's where I want you to go. Tell me how you'd like to get there. And no one's getting that in WWE, man.
Well, I mean, it's funny because if you're in Tony's shoes and you're looking at this like it's one thing to get Jericho, right? You've got a guy that is a perennial great. He's been around forever. He's, ever changing guy, but he's not at his prime. He's not peak Jericho. You managed to get one of the top WWE guys in their prime in your lap. He probably was sitting there like, oh, of course, whatever you want to do, John. Like, hey, we're just here to accommodate you, man. We're going to roll a red carpet out for you. Because, I mean, at the time when they got him, he was the biggest get they got. I would say he was the hottest free agent in the entire industry. And getting him was a huge deal. So I would have been looking at it the same way. Like, oh, no, you weren't happy there? Let me know why. Okay, well, what can we do for you? Everything would have been whatever you like.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to laugh at what you just said. That's fair. I mean, if I'm Colin, I'm thinking the same thing. He kind of yeah, he kind of fell into the lap. Perfect situation. Timing was great. And not for nothing, kids, Jon Moxley's 35.
Yeah.
That's all. This is not a 42-year-old guy here, everybody. This is when Phil says he's in his prime, believe it. I mean, it's scary that he's only 35. Uh, I mean, listen, if he stays healthy, he's got 15 more years of this. Easy 15 more years of this. I mean, especially in a company where you're not on the road, at least not right now. You're not working, X number of dates per month, per week, tearing your body down. I mean, he stays healthy and keeps the kind of schedule he has now. We're going to be seeing him for a long time, and I'm all in it. Dude, okay. I'm sure the answer is yes for everybody under his employ because Khan wants his whole roster there. Do you make the hard money play to keep Jon Moxley at all costs, no matter what happens?
Yes, I absolutely think of the 5 guys that you want to build your company around, um, and if you had the choice, let's just say you could pick just 5 guys off of that roster right now. I absolutely think that Moxley is at the top of that list. If it's definitely like Omega for sure and Moxley. Like those are the top two that no matter what, you're making sure you re-sign those guys.
Just pick Moxley 5 times. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean at this point, you could arguably say that Moxley is more important of a get than Omega. I mean, Omega is a good is a get for a lot of reasons as well, but in terms of what Moxley does for you, um, in terms of just like, not just, that he's recognizable because he worked at the other company, but just he's just so versatile. You can do so many other things with him. Um, I mean, he's just because the thing with Omega's great and he has star power, but Omega is not a guy that is going to get over with everybody in the same way that Moxley would. Um, I feel like even if you don't like AEW, um, you can understand what is cool about Moxley.
Yeah. He is he's got the daredevil spirit of Mick Foley wrapped in a James Dean kind of mentality. He is cool. He's hip. He's got swagger. You know, I mean, he's got when he does that Conor McGregor thing, that walk, dude. It's him. I mean, Conor just needs to retire that. Just give it to John because it suits him. Yeah, just
Yeah,
the way he carries himself.
he's got his patented strut and everything that he does down, like the way he walks into a room, the way he talks. And there's certain things that he does, like there's certain mannerisms that he does. I'm sure if anybody else did it, it would look stupid and goofy,
Mm.
but he does it and it works. And I mean, it's just like I said when he rolled into the ring at Double or Nothing. He did like that spin, and he kind of looked around. It looked goofy on the surface, but no, it's him. He can make this work. Um, I mean, there's even certain things about his promo styles that it's so off the cuff and um it's so down to earth in a way that it's almost like, well, this guy's nothing special. He's just talking, but it's just the way that he delivers. And you can't duplicate that.
I think for me, the defining aspect of a great promo from a great talent is how do I feel when they're done? Not just how I feel during it. How do I feel when they're done? When Dusty was done cutting a promo, I could jump out of my seat. I mean, just charisma off the charts. Physically could get out of my seat and applaud. I had that with Punk a lot. I have it with John. And I know it's, I don't leave Flair out. Flair's the man in more ways than one. But I'm talking about a promo that would move me emotionally to the point of wanting to stand up and say, screw it. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how it looks. I'm going to stand up and physically applaud this because this guy is freaking great. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. The promo that he cut when he was sitting down, he was talking about his dad. it was the promo that included the line, "We're the good guys." Dude, that I have watched that promo. I'll probably watch it again after we get done here. I've watched it so many times. I think it's underrated, number one, because he cuts so many good ones now. But I think it's I don't know if it's his hard times promo, but it's got to be up there. And I think it's one of his best. But what's funny is, I mean, what's the chances he even practices anything? He just gets it in his head like a story, and then they say, "Okay, John, go," and then he just talks. I'm like, it's almost a crime to be that freaking good at this. But he just makes it look so. And hey, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he loses sleep over how he sounds, and he really scrutinizes himself. I don't know. It just feels like he rolls out of bed and he's just Jon Moxley, man.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that a lot of work goes into what he does. I would assume a lot of work went into reinventing himself. Um, but yeah, he makes it look extremely effortless.
And talk to me about timing. We've been talking about timing a few times here. The timing of the Revolution debacle at the end, but with Kingston, who I think should be referred to as Eddie by God Kingston, because
um,
my God, dude, these two together, dude, it's like Butch and Sundance. That's what this is. This is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, man, for sure.
yeah, I mean, shoot, I mean, even when you just talk about timing, him coming to AEW when he did, the timing of AEW doing their first major pay per view and him being out of his contract in time to do that show. Um, the timing of that just couldn't have been any better. Um, I mean, even the timing of him going to New Japan when he did, it just couldn't have been any more perfect. Um, yeah, but yeah, now I mean, like the the death match, the exploding barbed wire death match. Like there thing is gonna get remembered for this botched explosion. I mean, don't get me wrong, like pyro of this thing is crap. It's total crap. But I don't think you could take away how great Moxley looked that night. I mean, how cool he looked coming into the ring with the leather jacket like Onita. And just, I mean, everything afterwards, how he managed to cut that great promo the week afterwards. And I mean, hasn't missed a beat since, in my opinion. I, 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 he just looks Teflon at this point.
And we're talking about promos here too. The promo, his first promo in AEW, when he said this is a paradigm shift, and then he ends up calling the double arm DDT his finisher, and WWE was called Dirty Deeds, and now he gets sort of a higher angle on the drop and calls it the paradigm shift. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, you want your top guy to be able to do anything and to be able to work anybody and to be able to cut a promo at a moment's notice. You want him to be able to talk to people outside the company if you need him to. You want him to be able to carry himself professionally in an interview. You want him to be able to. He's got to be responsible. He's obviously got to be loyal. When you say show up at 5, he's there at 4:30. When you say you might stay past 10, he's there till 12. John checks all the boxes. I don't know. I'm sure Cody does too. I'm sure probably Omega does as well. But for me, you know, all around talent who can do anything, turn heel at a moment's notice, and make you hate him for it. I think he could do it. I mean, he's so good. And I love that he's getting the time now to show off. He is everything that they want and that any pro wrestling promoter would love to have this guy in the locker room. That's why I think Khan would do anything necessary on the planet to keep him locked in. Um, what did you think about his run as AEW World Champion?
I thought it was really good for the most part. Like, I know there were some hiccups with it because of COVID. Um, and when he won it, I think it would have gotten over much bigger if there were still live crowds and if there were still if they were still able to do a lot of things that they wanted to do. Um, but I think he still at this point is the best AEW champion so far of the three. Um, I just think he carried this thing with a presence that I don't think Jericho could. Um, I think he, at the time when he was champion, was probably the top babyface champion, at least in the U.S. Because he was. It wasn't just that he had this presence, but it was also that you couldn't get one over on him. We're so conditioned to look at the face champion because of WWE as some guy that's gullible and oh well, he'll eventually win out, but he has to look like an underdog first. He has to look stupid first in order for him to get to the win. And Moxley never did that. He always looked confident. He always looked sure of himself. I mean, you could see that in the MJF feud when he tried to get one over him with him, and he tried to, bait him into doing the deal to not use the paradigm shift, and he tricked him. He tricked him when he signed the contract, and even in the match, being smart enough to go, "Oh, the ref's not looking. Paradigm shift. I win." And I know some people didn't like that finish, but I was like, "This is brilliant because it makes Mox look like." No, I'm not going to play into all of the goofy wrestling tropes where you have to abide by the rules to be a good guy. No, I am the good guy in this. I got one over on the guy that was going to cheat anyway.
It's perfect. I've heard the same criticism as well, and I'm like, first of all, people gotta relax. It's just pro wrestling. I think we've been saying that for a long time. But second, to your point, you're right. Fans are conditioned who basically only maybe watch WWE have been conditioned for years. This is what a babyface is, and like Braun Strowman's a perfect example of that because Braun Strowman looks like a clown most of the time, not because he's trying to, but because that's how they portray him. They make him look like a blithering idiot. That's not somebody I want to pull for. I don't want to buy tickets to see that guy because I think he's a moron. And if the bad guys always get one over on him, then he's not much of a good guy and he's not much of a hero. And he probably won't win the day. He's certainly not going to win the feud. And if he does, I'm not going to care. Right. I mean, when Mox goes into a match, and he said it a couple of times. He said about the death match. He's like, you know what? This is my last time, so be it. This is my last match, whatever. And I'm like, man, that's the kind of guy you pull for is that I'm going to go into war. This could be it. This could be the last you see of me. Be sure you get a ticket. You don't want to miss this. I mean, dude, that's great stuff, man.
Yeah, they couldn't have filmed that finish any better. I thought that finish was fantastic. You get the camera zoom straight in on MJF picking up the ring, getting ready to hit him with it, and then Mox just stands there in his face and just looks at him like you weasel and just paradigm shifts him straight out and just wins the match. I thought it was perfect.
So good, man. There's been all this buzz about a 4 horseman gimmick in AEW, and now MJF's got this. There's 6 of them. I don't think that's 4. There's 6 total. Horseman plus 2. Hey, man, what about a babyface group? Cody, Kingston, and Mox. Dude, can you imagine those 3 guys running together on TV, running together in storylines? Man, that would be. You talk about a main event mafia to steal a term, dude. That would be it, man. That'd be some fun stuff to watch.
They've got a few guys that if they really wanted to push to the front of their card, they could. They've got guys that just clearly have it, and people want to cheer for them. Like I think everybody saw it with Penta this week, and just how great Penta is, and how much you want to cheer him. He wasn't doing anything in terms of like doing all these great promos, but just nonverbal stuff like standing in the crowd with his arms crossed with the
with the
leprechaun hat. I mean, and Orange Cassidy's the same thing. He's just so cool. Like there's something cool about him. Like the way he comes in, the way he walks, like his whole gimmick seems like it shouldn't work, but it does because he gets all of the nonverbal stuff about this character right.
Mm-hmm. So who's at the time we record this, kids, Moxley and Kingston are a duo. You could pretty much say their friendship's back on. We know that Moxley's going to be a dad soon. There's all this buzz. Well, Mox is going to take all this time off. And I'm thinking, you guys know that they're still not touring, right? It's TV once a week, everybody. But people are convinced that oh no, he's going to take, and I get it. I get why he would, and that's fine. I mean, I don't know if I see him doing it, but let's say that he does, and then he comes back. I mean, who's he got left to feud with? It, and I mean, it's a big roster, so there's plenty of people. Is there a feud in particular that you're sort of salivating over the thought of Moxley working this guy?
Um, hmm. Well, I think there's a way to get him away from some of the bigger name guys. I think Omega and Moxley was great, but I think you've got to get him kind of out of that picture for a minute because I mean I don't think we need to do Omega Mox again anytime soon. Um, but I mean when you're talking about him and Kingston as a duo, oh, there's plenty of stuff you can do with those guys as a tag team. I mean, putting those guys against the Lucha Brothers alone,
Oh,
that's a match. I mean, putting those guys against the Young Bucks, that's a match. I mean, there's plenty you could do. Put those guys in the ring with Santana and Ortiz. Oh my god,
yeah.
there's tons you can do with that. I mean, I still think that there's money in Mox versus Darby. I think that that's still an interesting feud if you want to go the singles route. I think there's some other up and coming singles guys that they can put him against. Um, like Darby definitely strikes like he that definitely strikes me as an interesting feud for Mox to revisit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me ask you this. During certain points of doing the main event, I get randomly hit with, "Hey, I heard he's going to go back and be Dean Ambrose again in WWE. That's what I heard." And I'm always thinking, first of all, where are you hearing this from? And second, what I saw was this random quote in an interview he did on some pod somewhere. I don't know what it was, where he said that he wouldn't dismiss the idea of doing business with WWE again in the future or something to that effect. Dude, is there a part of the multiverse in which you can imagine the Jon Moxley that we know and love today entertaining an offer to go back to once again become Dean Ambrose in WWE?
No, not anytime soon. Um,
And what would have to get him there for him to seriously consider it? I mean, the fact that you're not Jon Moxley, neither am I. We can't really answer that, but what would it have to be, I wonder? You know what I mean?
well, I mean, I have to believe, as much fun as he's having, I have to believe his legacy as a member of the Shield, as the youngest Grand Slam champion in the company, all of that stuff matters to him. I don't think that all of those accomplishments don't mean anything to him. As much as he was disgruntled by the time he left, I think with some time and some time to do everything he wanted to do when he was there elsewhere, he'll be fine with, entertaining the idea of maybe going back there once he's done with his career and if they want to induct him in the Hall of Fame and, do like all of the legend spots. I can see that. But in terms of him going back and working full time, I don't see that.
I don't see it either. I'd be shocked and awed if he did, because it would be almost like you got a winning lottery ticket and then you just give it away to somebody else. Like I just don't. What would possess someone to do that? That seems. And look, I don't want to make it sound as though, well, the timing of this AEW thing was perfect. And boy, they handed him a pile of cash, and boy, he lucked out. I'm sorry. If we made it sound like that, that's on me. I apologize. That's not what I believe at all. I believe that this guy had it coming, that he earned this. He earned the right to call his own shot. I mean, he bled a lot in a lot of different places before he ever signed with WWE. And then when he got with them, you know, talk about doing everything you're asked to do and then some. Dude, he did everything he was asked to do. Shut, of course, um, short of cutting an improper promo about his friend recovering from cancer, which is
Yeah.
another, thing he revealed on Jericho's podcast. He did everything that was asked of him, man. So like at some point there's a payoff for the hard work, and he didn't get the payoff in the company he was working for. He got another company. I don't begrudge a dime he's earning now because he earned it and he's earning it today,
Absolutely. You can't take I mean, people have to remember, as big as he was with WWE, when he left, he was in a mid card feud.
Yeah.
That was an intercontinental championship feud. He wasn't in the world title picture. He went from being what they considered a secondary star on Raw to being the star on AEW Dynamite. He is was the world champion, the number one wrestler in the world on PWI's list. Total difference. And I mean, that's why I'm like, he bet on himself and it worked. I mean, and that's why I say timing is everything as well, because if AEW didn't form in 2019 and they weren't just doing their first pay per view right when he was released and he signed, he probably would be in New Japan, doing stuff overseas or possibly, looking at other alternatives. But when AEW popped up as another viable alternative with all this buzz, it was just the perfect combination for him.
So let me ask you this. Uh, uh, do you have we've been talking a lot about his promos and his ring work, which should be talked about. I maintain that. Do you have a favorite Moxley match, whether as Moxley or Ambrose? Is there any that stick out to you? We've said a lot about his promos, which I get it, but you know,
Um, I really enjoyed that his first big match when he got to New Japan. I think it was the match with Juice for the title.
yeah, it was really good.
No, that was probably like his second match. The first match was Juice for the United States Championship. I really liked that one. The match he had with Archer at Wrestle Kingdom was really good. Um, of course, the Suzuki match because the dream match.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
um, I really like that match with MJF. I think that match is kind of underrated. Because it's because both of their roles were so defined in it, and I thought it was just such a good use of the heel and face dynamic, and it wasn't just like a straightforward face. Like he's clearly the face in that feud, but just that he was able to still be himself and not have to conform to all of the usual tropes of being a face. Um, huh, man, I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I really enjoy the death match. I really like the barbed wire death match. I also like their original lights out match from Full Gear, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, his matches with Omega have been really good. Like their trilogy of matches have been fantastic.
I think he had great chemistry with Seth, and I think because they were friends and still are, I'm sure, that you tend to go a little bit harder when it's with a friend because you can trust each other and you know what the goal of each guy is, and it's just to make the match a hit and get each other over. Um, I didn't dislike the match with Kenta. It's funny it didn't get much press after it happened because it was kind of buried on a Friday streaming service on New Japan World, but um, I would prefer that match to have happened in front of an audience. But I thought the match was fine. His stuff with Suzuki, like you said, does stand out. The match with Juice is really good. The stuff with Naito,
Yeah,
he's just in the same way he's carved out a reputation for himself on the mic now. I mean, he's wrestling his style of match, and one of the first things he does is take it outside the ring, and I'm okay with that to a large extent. I cut him more slack than I cut other people. I don't want the match to stay outside the ring the whole time because at some point it's like, okay, get it back in the ring. But it feels like he's had sort of a good combination of doing both in his matches. I mean, the Moxley style, as you could actually call it, is sort of the Minoru Suzuki style as well, to a large degree. I mean, but it works for his character, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean the Kingston match at
Ah, yes.
yeah, where was that? Is that Full Gear 2021?
I believe so. Yeah, Full Gear.
Yeah, that's also a really good match. Man, and talk about just everything that Kingston has managed to do with AEW after just being in an open challenge and getting a contract and getting two world title matches out of that and getting the main event of pay per view. It's crazy.
he's come a long way, man. He's come a really long way. The guy that we thought was going to lead the Shield to sort of being the third guy in the Shield, I guess. I mean, he really was. I mean, you got to say, man, he was relegated to being the third wheel in the Shield, which I
Yeah,
didn't think that was fair to him at all at the time, man. I think because he was obviously he was capable of so much more.
yeah, for sure. And I would say at this point, at this point in his career, he's in a better spot than the other three of them. I mean, you can put him and Roman at neck and neck right now because Roman's doing the best work of his career. But I'm telling you, at the beginning of this year, coming out of 2019, there weren't many wrestlers in the industry as hot as Moxley was.
Yeah, I mean, and when when Phil says hot, he means white hot, 100% white hot. It's crazy. Um, yeah, he really has. He's coming to his own, man, and it's like just watching a flower bloom, um, for lack of a better term. Do you think at some point that, and it's not really a criticism, it's just general overall question. Do you think that the outside of the ring stuff and you know, when I say hardcore, I don't mean ECW version of hardcore, but does that detract sometimes for him? Does he maybe go there a little too much? Is it just the right amount, or does it just depend on the match in question?
I think it depends on the match, and I think it depends on the opponent. While the Hager match was kind of not that great, and a lot of people criticized it pretty heavily, I understood what he was trying to do with it and trying to do like a shoot style, like um, MMA style fight. And I think if you could get a different opponent other than Hager, that like, could you imagine if he had that kind of match now with like somebody else that has like a better pedigree, like a Matt Riddle or even like a Brock now. If he tried to wrestle that kind of
Wow.
style, that would be fantastic.
And to your point, because this always sticks in my head in terms of, crap that he did in WWE that I can't believe he said and can't believe that he did. There was that promo that night when Brock and Heyman were in the ring and we were heading toward Ambrose versus Lesnar. And he gets in the ring and he says, word for word, people are telling me that, that I don't want to, I don't want to face, they don't want to face Brock. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to fight him. I don't want to face him either. Something to that effect. And I remember doing a double take and I, on DVR, rewound. I said, what did he just say? And I was stunned. I was stunned by a top baby face saying, I don't want to fight him. I don't want to face him. So I waited till the next day. And sure enough, when that clip hit YouTube, WWE took that out. They edited that out. And I'm thinking, first of all, who told him to say it? Like, if everything's so controlled in that company, and you know it is, someone told him to say that. But dude, when it came out of his mouth, I thought, they just took this guy's manhood away from him. Now, not only do I know he won't beat Lesnar. Now I don't care if he does because he flat out admitted, essentially, I don't want to fight this guy. I'm scared of him. And in that moment, I said, yeah, I don't know if he's ever going to be anywhere because of the way he's being handled right now. Not that I expected John Wayne, because as I told you at the start of this, Phil, I didn't at all till he got to AEW and then saw what he could do. But that told me right there, that one line in that one promo said it all. Like, this is who they think he is. That's who they think he is. That he's this trepidatious and he's crazy and he's too crazy for his own good. He's too crazy to be good. Like, dude. But now, as you said, put him in the ring now with Brock in an AEW ring, maybe. My God. Dude,
Yeah, I
that's a
mean,
match right there, man. I would pay to see that now.
that's a big money match. I mean, and you can look at anybody. Like, man, if I'm saying like the shoot style, like if you bring Velasquez in, like the way that Velasquez was brought into WWE, and you put him in a ring with Mox right now, I think
Oh,
that's a money match.
yeah.
And there's a few guys that like if AEW really wanted to go that route that WWE does and brings in like a boxer or like an MMA guy, and they were looking for somebody in the company to wrestle, I think Mox is the guy.
I don't know who else it would be, honestly.
Yeah, I think Mox has the star power. He has the style to match theirs. I think he's the guy. And I mean, I say all that to go. I think he enjoys doing the deathmatch stuff. I think he's always liked that stuff, and having to tone down on that stuff with WWE for so long and getting creative freedom again. I think he's like, no, I'm going to get as much deathmatch stuff out as I can now because I'm in, I can do it, and so I think that that's part of it. But at the same time, I don't I don't think people should look past how good he still is in ring. I mean, this is still a guy that's 6'3" and does all that and can still do like suicide dives and all this other stuff. He's still great in ring.
Yeah, he's all around, dude. He's the whole package. I really believe that, and I think that I hope, because I know I am. I hope that today's wrestling fans know what they have with this guy, and he's not just a headline. He's not just another guy. I hope they know that look, dude, this may sound like a stretch. I don't know. Maybe it does. And you know what? Maybe I'll be wrong and it is a stretch. I think we'll be talking about this time with this guy 20 years from now. I believe that. I believe
I
we'll be talking
absolutely
about it then.
agree. I think when you look at the run, and I think he will absolutely be AW champion again someday. But when you look at like initial runs that made the belt, I know what Jericho was supposed to do as an inaugural champion, and he did do that. But I'm telling you, I will argue out of the first few champions that Mox is going to be one of the most memorable champions from the initial run.
He, as I said, man, he checks all the boxes, and the title is only going to be worth the effort that's put into it. And John put major effort into it, and John was for me to use the words great champion. That's a tall order, and I don't know if that's being fair to John. He was a very good champion because um, he, whether he did or not, it looked as though he was legit taking this seriously. Like
Yes.
it wasn't a prop to him. We hear the word prop all the time. Talk to me. Listen, go talk to the guys that have performed at WrestleMania and ask them if it's a prop. They're going to tell you it's not. Okay, period. So I don't think it's a prop to him. I think he took it seriously. He takes it seriously now, which is one thing that sets him and Kingston apart from maybe some others in that company who think it's all time to thumb your nose and do a ha-ha bit. And Moxley's more like, look, it's time to step up. Let's do this. I mean, I don't know, like he made the title mean something. And that title is more important today because of the work he put into it. I would 100% agree with that. So you and I are on the same page when we say that, he's going to be champion again at some point. Um, I want to see him stay there. I want to see him finish his career in AEW. I'm like you, though. I think one day he will make the trek back to WWE to say, it's like going back to the team that you got into the NBA playing with. I mean, you want to end your career and see your jersey hung in the rafters. I get it. It makes sense. That's the team that took a chance on you to begin with. But, there's something to be said about him being in an AEW Hall of Fame one day, which he will. I mean, he could be the first guy in it for all we know, whenever that actually happens. Um, he's got a long way to go. As we said, kids, he's only 35. He's got a lot of career, a lot of life ahead of him, and continued success to Jon Moxley, of course, because as we said, the guy's earned it. So, Phil, narrow it down for me, man. What's your last word on Jon Moxley?
I think when you look at what was supposed to be considered the next boom in wrestling, with AEW coming along and starting this new change of landscape. Let's throw all of the buzzwords in there. All of, shifting the landscape of the wrestling industry. I think Moxley is going to be remembered as one of the biggest stars of this era. I really do think that.
I think much in the same way we will never forget CM Punk, we're never going to forget Jon Moxley. And I think they have a lot in common. And not to open up a can of worms at the end of the show here, but if the day ever came that Punk had the itch and had to scratch it, it would be Punk versus Moxley in a heartbeat, because it's the only match that makes sense.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, there's nobody else in AEW that I feel like he has like the same kind of connection and storyline with
Yep.
that other than Mox.
I agree. And that's the match. Dude, I will find a way to get there. I don't care whose car I got to steal. I don't care what I got to do, what lies I got to tell. I'll be there to see that match live, and with the highest dollar ticket I could possibly afford. But to be fair, I just want to see Moxley in person again as Jon Moxley. And I want to see him in AEW, and I want to see him do his thing because, pound for pound, quality for quality, everything, all things considered, all things being fair, I don't know of anybody else in the game today who is as all around as good in every facet of the game as Jon Moxley. And that sounds like a high praise, and it is, but I think it's completely founded, and I think it's well deserved. And again, he's got a lot of time left, and here's hoping a lot of success comes his way and he stays healthy enough to enjoy it. And we see a lot of cool stuff from him in the future, especially in AEW. And that is Jon Moxley. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.